The truck's engine roared as it careened down the abandoned highway, swerving to avoid the burned-out husks of other vehicles. Inside, the small group of survivors clung to the seats, their knuckles white with fear. "We have to find a safe place. Now," shouted Lily, gripping the door handle as the truck lurched around a sharp turn. Her husband, Jake, kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his jaw set with grim determination. The radio said there's an army compound a few miles up ahead. That's our best chance. The others, a mix of strangers thrust together by the nightmare unfolding around them, exchanged anxious glances. They had been on the road for days, fleeing the relentless onslaught of the undead. Every moment was a battle for survival, a desperate struggle to outrun the horrors that stalked them. Suddenly, a sickening thud echoed through the truck as they ran over something. The vehicle shuddered, and Jake struggled to maintain control. "What was that?" cried one of the passengers, her voice trembling. Jake gritted his teeth. "I don't know, but we can't stop. We have to keep moving." The truck lurched forward, the engine straining as it fought to maintain its speed. The survivors peered out the windows, their hearts pounding, their eyes scanning the desolate landscape for any sign of safety. And then, in the distance, they saw it, the imposing gates of the army compound, a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. "There it is," Jake shouted, his voice tinged with relief. "We made it." The truck barreled towards the compound, the survivors' hopes rising with each passing second. But as they drew closer, a terrible realization dawned on them. The gates were open, and beyond them, the sprawling military base was overrun with the undead. "No," Lily breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It can't be." Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. "We have to get out of here now." But it was too late. The truck lurched to a halt as it struck a barricade, and the survivors found themselves trapped, surrounded by the ravenous horde of zombies. In the chaos that followed, the survivors fought for their lives, using whatever they could find to defend themselves. Gunshots echoed through the air, mingling with the agonized screams of the infected. Lily watched in horror as one of the passengers, a young man named Ethan, was dragged away by a group of zombies, his anguished cries fading into the distance. She felt her stomach churn, the bile rising in her throat, as she realized that their desperate search for a safe haven had led them straight into the heart of a nightmare. The survivors huddled together, their backs against the overturned truck, their eyes darting from one direction to the next, searching for a way out. But the zombies pressed in, their rotting limbs reaching towards them, their gaping mouths emitting a chorus of inhuman moans. As the sun began to set, casting an eerie, blood-red glow over the compound, Lily knew that they were running out of time. The night would bring even greater horrors, and they were trapped, with no way to escape. In that moment, she realized that their search for a safe zone had led them straight into the heart of a nightmare, a place where the living and the dead were locked in a desperate, unending battle for survival. And as the zombies closed in, Lily knew that they would have to fight with everything they had if they were to have any chance of making it out alive. The survivors huddled together, their backs pressed against the overturned truck as the horde of zombies slowly closed in. Lily's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she desperately searched for a way out. "We have to do something," she cried, her voice shaking with fear. "We can't just sit here and wait to be torn apart." Jake gripped her hand, his eyes steely with determination. "We'll fight our way out of this, I promise. But we need to keep our heads and stay calm." The others nodded, their faces etched with grim resolve. They knew that panic would only hasten their demise, so they steadied their nerves and tightened their grips on the makeshift weapons they had managed to scavenge. As the first wave of zombies lurched towards them, the survivors sprang into action. Lily swung a metal pipe with all her might, cracking the skull of the closest undead creature. Jake fired his handgun, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Around them, the air was thick with the stench of decay and the sounds of the struggle. the snarls of the zombies, the grunts of the survivors, the thunderous crack of gunfire. For a moment, it seemed as if the survivors might be able to hold out, their determination and skill keeping the horde at bay. But then, a new threat emerged from the shadows. A hulking, mutated zombie, its body twisted and deformed, its movements unnaturally fast and agile. "What the hell is that thing?" One of the passengers, a young woman named Emma, gasped in horror. The mutant zombie let out a bone-chilling roar and charged towards them, its jagged claws slashing through the air. The survivors scattered, narrowly avoiding the creature's savage assault. "Spread out!" Jake shouted, firing round after round at the towering monstrosity. "We can't let it box us in." The survivors scattered, their weapons flashing as they fought to hold back the relentless onslaught of the undead. But the mutant zombie was unlike anything they had ever faced before, its preternatural speed and strength making it a formidable foe. Lily felt her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the battle unfold. She knew that they were running out of time, that the horde would soon overwhelm them if they didn't find a way to escape. And then, in the distance, she saw it, a narrow gap in the fence, a glimmer of hope in the midst of the chaos. "Jake," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the din of the battle. "There, we can make it through." Jake's eyes followed her gaze, and a glimmer of hope flickered across his face. "All right, everyone, listen up," he yelled. "We're going to make a break for that gap in the fence. Stay close and keep moving." The survivors braced themselves, their weapons at the ready, as Jake led the charge towards the gap. Lily ran alongside him, her heart pounding, her lungs burning, as they fought to reach the safety of the open road beyond. But as they neared the fence, a new threat emerged. A swarm of the mutant zombies, their guttural roars echoing through the compound. The survivors found themselves trapped, surrounded by the relentless horde, with no way out. And as the creatures closed in, Lily knew that their desperate search for a safe haven had led them straight into the heart of a nightmare. The survivors huddled together, their backs pressed against the crumbling wall of the compound, as the horde of mutant zombies closed in around them. Lily's hands trembled as she gripped the metal pipe she had been using to fend off the undead, her heart pounding in her chest. "We're trapped," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the snarls and roars of the creatures. Jake stood beside her, his jaw set with grim determination. "We have to keep fighting," he said, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of escape. "There has to be a way out of this." The others nodded, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and resolve. They knew that their only chance of survival lay in their ability to overcome the overwhelming odds they now faced. As the first of the mutant zombies lunged towards them, the survivors sprang into action. Lily swung her pipe with all her might, shattering the creature's skull and sending it crashing to the ground. Jake and the others followed suit, their weapons flashing as they fought to hold back the horde. But for every zombie they felled, two more seemed to take its place. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the sounds of the struggle, the snarls of the undead, the grunts of the survivors, the crack of gunfire. Lily felt her strength begin to wane, her arms aching from the strain of swinging the heavy pipe. She could feel the eyes of the others upon her, their fear and desperation palpable. "We can't keep this up much longer," she gasped, her voice hoarse. Jake nodded, his brow furrowed with worry. "I know," he said, his gaze darting around the compound. "We need to find another way out of this, something we haven't tried yet." Suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared in the distance. A small gate, partially obscured by the horde of zombies. Lily's eyes widened as she caught sight of it. "There," she cried, pointing towards the gate. "If we can make it to that gate, we might have a chance." Jake followed her gaze, a spark of determination in his eyes. "All right, listen up," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're going to make a run for that gate. Stay close and keep moving." The survivors braced themselves, their weapons at the ready, as Jake led the charge towards the gate. Lily ran beside him, her lungs burning, her muscles aching, as they fought to reach their only chance of escape. The mutant zombies howled and snarled, their twisted bodies surging forward to block their path. But the survivors refused to be deterred, their desperation fueling their strength as they hacked and slashed their way through the horde. Finally, they reached the gate, their hands grasping the rusted metal as they pulled it open. Lily felt a surge of hope as they spilled through the opening, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. But as they turned to look back, they realized that not everyone had made it. One of the passengers, a young man named Ethan, lay motionless on the ground, his body torn and bloodied. Lily felt a lump in her throat as she watched the zombies descend upon him, their jaws snapping and tearing at his flesh. She knew that there was nothing they could do, that to try and save him would only mean certain death. As they fled the compound, the sound of Ethan's agonized screams echoing in their ears, Lily knew that the nightmare was far from over. The mutant zombies had proven to be a formidable enemy, and she knew that they would have to be even more vigilant if they were to survive. But for now, all that mattered was reaching safety and putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the horrors they had left behind. The survivors ran through the dark streets, their lungs burning and their legs aching, as they fled the horrors of the compound. Lily clutched Jake's hand, her heart pounding in her chest, as they navigated the abandoned buildings and rubble-strewn alleys. "We can't stop," Jake panted, his voice hoarse. "Those things, they're not like the others. We have to keep moving." The others nodded, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. They had seen what the mutant zombies were capable of, and they knew that their only chance of survival lay in putting as much distance between themselves and the compound as possible. As they ran, Lily couldn't help but glance back, her mind replaying the agonizing fate of Ethan. The image of the young man being torn apart by the ravenous horde was seared into her memory, a haunting reminder of the horrors they had faced. "We should have been able to save him," she whispered, her voice thick with grief. Jake squeezed her hand, his expression one of empathy. "I know," he said softly, "but we can't dwell on it now. We have to focus on getting to safety." Lily nodded, swallowing back the lump in her throat. She knew that Jake was right. They couldn't afford to be weighed down by their losses, not when their own survival hung in the balance. As they rounded a corner, they came upon a battered but intact building. Jake paused, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "What is it?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with hope. "I think this could be a good place to hole up for the night," Jake replied, his gaze sweeping over the structure. "It looks secure, and we might be able to find some supplies inside." The others gathered around, their expressions cautious but hopeful. They knew that they couldn't run forever, and a moment of respite was desperately needed. "All right, let's check it out," Jake said, leading the way towards the building. As they cautiously made their way inside, the survivors found themselves in what appeared to be an old office building. The halls were dark and dusty, and the air was thick with the stale scent of decay. "Keep your guard up," Jake warned, his voice low. "We don't know what might be lurking in here." The group moved quietly through the building, their eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of danger. Lily's heart hammered in her chest as they made their way up a staircase, the creaking of the steps echoing in the eerie silence. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from down the hall, followed by the unmistakable sound of snarling. The survivors froze, their weapons raised, as they braced themselves for the worst. "What was that?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Jake shook his head, his expression grim. "I don't know, but we're about to find out." Slowly, they crept towards the source of the commotion, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As they neared the end of the hallway, a horrifying sight came into view. A horde of the mutant zombies, their twisted and deformed bodies writhing and thrashing. Lily felt her blood run cold as she realized that they had stumbled into another nest of the monstrous creatures, their presence a chilling reminder that the nightmare was far from over. "We have to get out of here now," Jake hissed, his eyes darting around the hallway, searching for an escape. But as the survivors turned to flee, they found their path blocked by another group of the mutant zombies, their snarls echoing through the building. Trapped and surrounded, the survivors knew that they were running out of options. With the horde closing in, Lily knew that they would have to fight for their lives once again. And this time, they might not be so lucky. The survivors huddled together, their backs pressed against the wall as the horde of mutant zombies surrounded them. Lily's heart raced, her grip on the metal pipe in her hands tightening as she scanned the hallway for any sign of escape. "We're trapped," Emma whispered, her voice quivering with fear. Jake's jaw was set with grim determination as he surveyed their options. "We'll have to fight our way out," he said, his eyes narrowing. "It's the only chance we've got." The others nodded, their faces etched with a mix of terror and resolve. They knew that the mutant zombies were unlike anything they had faced before. Their speed, strength, and unpredictable nature made them a formidable foe. As the first of the creatures lunged towards them, the survivors sprang into action. Lily swung her pipe with all her might, the metal colliding with the zombie's skull with a sickening crunch. Jake and the others followed suit, their weapons flashing as they fought to hold back the horde. But for every mutant zombie they felled, two more seemed to take its place. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the cacophony of snarls, grunts, and the crack of gunfire. Lily felt her muscles burning, her lungs aching as she struggled to keep up the relentless assault. She could see the others beginning to falter, their movements growing more erratic as they succumbed to exhaustion. Suddenly, a new threat emerged from the shadows, a hulking, deformed creature with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp claws. The mutant zombie let out a bone-chilling roar, its massive body surging towards them with startling speed. "Look out!" Jake shouted, his voice barely audible over the din of the battle. The survivors scattered, narrowly avoiding the creature's savage assault. Lily felt her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the mutant zombie turn its attention towards Emma, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying precision. "Emma, run!" Lily cried, her voice laced with desperation. But Emma was frozen, her eyes wide with terror as the creature loomed over her. Lily watched in horror as the mutant zombie's claws descended, tearing through Emma's flesh like a hot knife through butter. The young woman's agonized scream rent the air, the sound shattering Lily's heart. She felt bile rise in her throat as she watched the life drain from Emma's eyes, her body crumpling to the floor. The other survivors fought on, their weapons flashing as they tried to hold back the horde. But Lily could see the fear and despair etched on their faces, their resolve beginning to crumble. "We can't keep this up," one of the men, a gruff-looking former soldier named Evan, panted. "We need to find a way out of here now." Jake nodded, his brow furrowed with concentration. "There has to be a way," he said, his gaze darting around the hallway. "We just have to." Suddenly, a glimmer of hope appeared in the distance, a set of stairs leading up to the next floor. Lily felt the surge of adrenaline as she realized that it might be their only chance of escape. "The stairs," she cried, pointing towards the stairwell. "If we can get up there, we might be able to lose them." Jake's eyes widened, a glimmer of hope flickering across his face. "All right, everyone, listen up," he shouted. "We're going to make a run for those stairs. Stay close and keep moving." The survivors braced themselves, their weapons at the ready, as Jake led the charge towards the stairwell. Lily ran beside him, her lungs burning, her muscles aching, as they fought to reach the relative safety of the upper floors. But as they neared the stairs, Lily felt her heart sink. The stairwell was blocked by a swarm of the mutant zombies, their twisted bodies surging towards them with terrifying speed. Trapped and surrounded, the survivors knew that they were running out of options. With the horde closing in, Lily knew that they would have to find a way to survive the onslaught, or face the same grim fate that had befallen Emma. The survivors pressed their backs against the wall, their weapons at the ready as the horde of mutant zombies closed in. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing to find a way out of their predicament. "We're running out of options," Evan growled, his eyes darting around the hallway. "We need to do something, and fast." Jake's brow was furrowed with concentration as he surveyed their surroundings. "There has to be another way up," he said, his voice tense. "We just have to find it." Lily felt a glimmer of hope at his words, but it was quickly extinguished as the mutant zombies surged forward, their guttural snarls echoing through the hallway. The survivors sprang into action, their weapons flashing as they fought to hold back the tide of the undead. Lily swung her pipe with all her might, cracking the skull of one of the creatures, while Jake and Evan unleashed a hail of gunfire. But for every zombie they felled, two more seemed to take its place. Lily could feel her strength beginning to wane, her arms aching from the exertion. "We can't keep this up much longer," she panted, her voice tinged with desperation. Jake's eyes narrowed as he scanned the hallway once more. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. "I think I see something." Lily followed his gaze and her heart leaped. In the distance, she could see a small door, partially obscured by the horde of zombies. "The elevator," Jake exclaimed, his voice laced with urgency. "If we can get to the elevator, we might be able to escape this nightmare." The other survivors nodded, their expressions grim but determined. They knew that it was a long shot, but it was their only remaining hope. "All right, listen up," Jake said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're going to make a run for that elevator. Stay close and keep moving. Don't stop for anything." The survivors braced themselves, their weapons at the ready, as Jake led the charge towards the elevator. Lily ran beside him, her lungs burning, her muscles aching, as they fought to carve a path through the horde. The mutant zombies swarmed around them, their claws slashing and their jaws snapping. Lily felt a surge of panic as one of the creatures lunged towards her, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. With a desperate swing of her pipe, she managed to knock the zombie back, but she knew that it was only a temporary respite. They had to reach the elevator, and they had to do it now. As they neared the door, Lily could see that it was partially blocked, the twisted bodies of the mutant zombies piled up in front of it. Jake paused, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the obstacle. "We're going to have to fight our way through," he said, his voice grim. "Everyone, get ready." The survivors braced themselves, their weapons at the ready, as they charged towards the blocked doorway. Lily felt her heart pounding in her chest as she swung her pipe, the metal clanging against the creatures' skulls. Suddenly, the door burst open, and the survivors spilled into the small elevator. Lily felt a surge of relief as the doors began to close, sealing them off from the horde of zombies. But their moment of respite was short-lived. As the elevator began to ascend, a new threat emerged, a hulking, mutated creature. Its body covered in jagged spines crashed through the doorway, its roar echoing through the small space. Lily felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that they had not escaped the nightmare after all. The mutant zombies had found them, and they were trapped. With nowhere to run and nowhere to hide, the survivors knew that they would have to dig deep and summon every ounce of their strength if they were to have any chance of surviving the onslaught that lay ahead. The elevator shuddered as the monstrous mutant zombie crashed through the doorway, its jagged spines and razor-sharp claws gleaming in the dim light. Lily felt her heart racing, her grip tightening on the metal pipe in her hands as she braced for the creature's attack. "We have to stop this thing," Jake shouted, his voice strained with the effort of holding his weapon steady. "If it gets its claws on us, we're done for." The other survivors nodded, their faces etched with grim determination. They knew that this was their last chance to escape the nightmare, and they were not about to go down without a fight. As the mutant zombie lunged forward, the survivors scattered, their weapons flashing as they struck at the creature's vulnerable spots. Lily swung her pipe with all her might, aiming for the beast's head, while Evan unloaded a barrage of gunfire, his bullets tearing through its thick hide. But the mutant zombie was unlike anything they had faced before, its movements lightning fast, and its resilience seemingly endless. No matter how many blows they landed, it continued to press forward, its guttural roars echoing through the cramped confines of the elevator. Lily felt the sweat beading on her brow as she fought to hold her ground, her muscles straining with the effort. She could see the fear in the eyes of the other survivors, their expressions a mix of desperation and determination. Suddenly, the elevator shuddered to a halt, the lights flickering as the power failed. Lily felt a chill run down her spine as the space was plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the creature's glowing eyes. "No, no, no," Jake muttered, his voice tinged with panic. "We can't be trapped in here with this thing." The mutant zombie let out a triumphant roar, its claws slashing through the air as it zeroed in on its prey. Lily could hear the others crying out in terror, their voices drowned out by the creature's savage growls. In the chaos, Lily felt a hand grip her arm, and she turned to see Evan, his face barely visible in the gloom. "We have to get out of here," he hissed, his voice low and urgent. "The stairs, we have to find the stairs." Lily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. If they could just reach the stairs, they might have a chance of escaping the mutant zombie and the confines of the elevator. "Jake," she called out, her voice cutting through the din. "The stairs, we have to find the stairs." Jake's reply was muffled, but Lily could hear the desperation in his tone. "All right, everyone, stick close and follow me. We're getting out of this hellhole." The survivors moved cautiously through the darkness, their weapons raised as they searched for the elusive stairwell. Lily could feel the mutant zombie's presence looming behind them, its heavy footfalls shaking the floor beneath their feet. Finally, they reached a door, and Lily felt a surge of hope as Jake pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit staircase. "This way," he shouted, ushering the others through the doorway. Lily was the last to enter, and as she turned to close the door behind her, she caught a glimpse of the mutant zombie, its eyes glowing with malevolent hunger as it charged towards her. With a desperate shove, Lily slammed the door shut, feeling the creature's claws rake against the metal as she turned to flee up the stairs. The survivors raced upwards, their lungs burning, their legs aching, as they fought to put as much distance between themselves and the nightmare below. But as they climbed, Lily knew that the battle was far from over. The mutant zombie had proven to be a relentless and horrifying foe, and she knew that they would have to find a way to defeat it if they were to have any chance of survival. With the sound of the creature's roars echoing behind them, the survivors pressed on, their determination fueled by the desperate need to escape the nightmare that had engulfed them. The survivors raced up the stairwell, their hearts pounding as they fled the hulking mutant zombie that pursued them. Lily's lungs burned, her muscles aching with the strain of the frantic climb, but she refused to slow her pace. "Keep moving," Jake shouted, his voice hoarse with exertion. "We can't let that thing catch us." The others followed behind him, their weapons at the ready, their faces etched with grim determination. They had survived so much, and they weren't about to let this monstrous creature be their undoing. As they reached the top of the stairs, Lily felt a glimmer of hope. The door ahead of them was ajar, and beyond it, she could see the faint glow of daylight. With renewed vigor, she pushed forward, bursting through the doorway and emerging onto the roof of the building. The survivors spilled out onto the rooftop, gasping for breath as they took in their surroundings. The city below was a desolate, nightmare landscape, the streets littered with the remains of the undead. But in the distance, Lily could see the faint glimmer of the horizon, a promise of a new day. "We made it," Evan breathed, his voice tinged with disbelief. Jake nodded, his expression tense. "For now," he replied, his gaze sweeping the rooftop. "But we need to find a way off this building before that thing catches up to us." Lily's heart sank as she remembered the mutant zombie that had pursued them. She could still hear its guttural roars echoing up the stairwell, a chilling reminder of the danger that still lurked below. Suddenly, a movement in the shadows caught her eye, and she whirled around, her weapon raised. But instead of the monstrous creature, she saw a figure emerge, its face obscured by a tattered hood. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaky. The figure stepped forward, and Lily felt a wave of relief wash over her as she recognized the familiar face of their companion, Emma. "Emma," she cried, rushing forward to embrace the other woman. "We thought you were." Emma held up a hand, silencing her. "I know," she said, her voice grave. "I barely made it out of there. But we don't have time to waste. That thing is still coming." Lily nodded, her expression hardening. "What do we do?" Emma turned and pointed towards the edge of the rooftop. "There," she said. "I saw a fire escape on the other side. If we can get down there, we might have a chance of losing that monster." The survivors exchanged glances, their faces etched with a mix of hope and trepidation. They knew that the fire escape was their only hope of escape, but the thought of facing the mutant zombie once more filled them with dread. "All right, let's do it," Jake said, his voice firm. "We've come this far, and we're not going to let some twisted abomination stop us now." With a renewed sense of purpose, the survivors made their way towards the fire escape, their weapons at the ready. Lily could feel the tension in the air, the palpable fear that this might be their last stand against the nightmare that had pursued them. As they reached the edge of the roof, a deafening roar shattered the silence, and the mutant zombie burst through the doorway, its eyes fixed on its prey. "Go, go, go," Jake shouted, ushering the others towards the fire escape. Lily felt her heart racing as she followed the others down the narrow metal stairs, the sounds of the creature's pursuit echoing in her ears. With each step, she feared that the mutant zombie would catch up to them, its claws ripping them to shreds. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs and spilled out onto the street, Lily felt a surge of hope. The city streets were empty, save for the scattered remains of the undead, and they had a clear path to freedom. "We did it," she breathed, her voice trembling with relief. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression solemn. "For now," he said, "but we can't stop. We have to keep moving, keep fighting, if we're going to survive this hell." Lily nodded, her grip tightening on her weapon. She knew that the nightmare was far from over, that the mutant zombies and the horrors they had faced were only the beginning. But as she looked at the faces of her fellow survivors, she saw a glimmer of determination, a refusal to surrender to the darkness that threatened to consume them. With a deep breath, she followed the others as they set out into the abandoned city, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of safety. The road ahead was uncertain, but Lily knew that they would face it together, united in their determination to survive the nightmare that had engulfed them. For now, they had escaped the clutches of the mutant zombies, but Lily knew that the battle was far from over. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They would have to fight with everything they had if they were to have any chance of emerging from this hellish nightmare alive.